It was early June of 2019 when three friends Ethan, Mia, and Jordan packed their camping gear into the back of Ethan's truck and set off toward Utah's vast wilderness. They were young, adventurous, and bonded by their love for exploring the outdoors. Their destination was a remote camping spot near a series of narrow canyons, far from the crowds and well-worn hiking trails. The area was known for its breathtaking views, towering sandstone walls, and deep silence that swallowed every sound. They told their families they'd be back by Sunday evening, but Sunday came, and the three never returned. When park rangers checked the trailhead the next morning, Ethan's truck was still parked in the same spot, untouched. Inside, they found a cooler, half-filled water bottles, and a few extra blankets. It was as if the group had fully expected to return. Their campsite was discovered a mile and a half into the woods, tents still pitched, sleeping bags rolled out, and a small fire pit filled with ash, showing they had cooked a meal the night before. Yet something felt off. Their backpacks and personal items were still there, including wallets, cameras, and even Mia's journal, left open with a pen resting across the page. Authorities launched a search that grew into one of the largest operations the region had ever seen. Helicopters swept over ridges and canyons, search dogs combed the brush, and dozens of volunteers scoured the trails. But the friends had simply vanished. What disturbed investigators most was the suddenness of their disappearance. There were no signs of a struggle, no tracks leading away from the campsite, and no evidence they had packed up to leave. It was as though the earth itself had swallowed them whole. As the days passed, theories began to swirl. Some suspected an accident perhaps. The friends had tried to explore the narrow canyons nearby and become trapped. Others believed foul play was involved, pointing to how strangely the campsite had been left behind. Families clung to the hope that the three were still alive, lost somewhere in the endless maze of sandstone and pine. But hope began to fade as days turned into weeks with no trace. Despite all efforts, the case reached a chilling standstill. Search teams withdrew, the families mourned without answers. And Whispering Slot Canyon, the dark, narrow place near where they vanished, was left with yet another mystery added to its haunted reputation. No one could explain why three experienced campers would vanish so suddenly, leaving everything behind. The silence of the canyon only deepened the questions that would remain for years. Within hours of the friends being reported missing, an organized search effort began. At first, rangers believed it would be a routine rescue. Perhaps the group had gotten lost, or one of them had been injured, forcing the others to stay behind. But the initial sweep of the trails turned up nothing. Their footprints faded just a few hundred yards from the campsite, as though the trail itself had erased their presence. Rescuers marked off grids and combed through each section carefully, calling out the names of Ethan, Mia, and Jordan. But no answers came back, only the hollow echoes bouncing from canyon walls. As the days stretched on, the search grew in scale. Helicopters hovered over the sandstone ridges, their rotors chopping the silence, while ground teams navigated the dangerous terrain below. Cadaver dogs were deployed, and for a brief moment, one of them caught a faint scent leading toward the mouth of Whispering Slot Canyon. But when trackers followed, the trail vanished completely, as if whatever had been there simply ceased to exist. This sudden disappearance of the scent baffled the search team and fueled speculation that something unnatural might be involved. Families of the missing friends gathered near the trailhead, waiting anxiously for news. They brought in photographs, personal belongings, and even clothing items for scent dogs to use. Volunteers, some locals, others from neighboring states, joined in, scouring dry riverbeds, climbing jagged rocks, and probing every shadowed corner of the forest. Despite the effort, not a single clue surfaced. Even the most experienced rescuers admitted they had never seen a case where three people could vanish without leaving behind any sign of direction, injury, or struggle. The canyon itself seemed to resist the search. Narrow passages twisted into mazes, where echoes distorted voices and made communication nearly impossible. Some searchers reported hearing faint whispers while inside, though none could identify the source. Others claimed their radios malfunctioned near the canyon walls, transmitting only bursts of static instead of voices. These unsettling occurrences slowed progress and planted fear in the minds of many. After a few days, some volunteers refused to return to Whispering Slot, saying the place felt wrong in ways they couldn't explain. By the third week, hope was dwindling. News outlets covered the case extensively, calling it one of Utah's most baffling disappearances. Detectives considered foul play, but the lack of evidence made the theory difficult to pursue. Searchers had mapped every possible route the campers could have taken, yet every path led to a dead end. It was as though the canyon had swallowed their story whole, leaving behind only questions. And with each day that passed, the silence of the wilderness seemed heavier, as if it held the secrets no one could uncover. Long before Ethan, Mia, and Jordan ever set foot in Utah's wilderness, locals already whispered about the place they disappeared, Whispering Slot Canyon. Unlike other canyons known for their scenic beauty, this one carried an unsettling aura. Narrow, jagged, and shrouded in shadows even at midday, the canyon seemed to exhale a coldness that never matched the desert heat surrounding it. Travelers described it as a place where sound behaved strangely, voices stretched, echoes twisted, and footsteps felt like they belonged to someone else. Few dared to camp near its entrance, and those who did never stayed long. Native legends surrounding the canyon were chilling, passed down through generations. The stories spoke of voices carried by the wind, spirits trapped within the stone, and travelers lured deeper by whispers until they were never seen again. Some tribes avoided the place entirely, calling it the mouth that eats light. They believed the canyon was a boundary between the living and something else, and in-between space where one wrong step could erase a person from the world. These old tales were dismissed by outsiders as folklore, but the locals never laughed at them. Hikers over the years had reported disturbing encounters. One man claimed he heard his own name whispered behind him, though no one was there. Another swore that as he tried to photograph the canyon, his camera malfunctioned and displayed images of figures standing in the shadows. Figures that vanished when he looked with his own eyes. Several families even reported losing pets near the area. Dogs would refuse to enter the canyon, growling at the empty passage as if they sensed something unseen lurking inside. Adding to the canyon's grim reputation were past disappearances. Records showed that at least 5 separate incidents had occurred within a 30-mile radius of Whispering Slot over the last few decades. Hikers who strayed too far, climbers who ventured in alone, even a pair of hunters who were last seen heading toward its cliffs. None were ever found. The details varied, but the outcome was always the same. People entered and never came back. Over time, the canyon developed a reputation not just as dangerous, but cursed. Locals warned visitors, but the warnings were often ignored by thrill-seekers and adventurers drawn by the mystery. For the 3 missing campers, Whispering Slot Canyon was just another stop on their wilderness journey. They couldn't have known how deeply the canyon's dark history ran, or how many stories of vanishing souls were tied to its depths. And when their own disappearance became part of its legend, the canyon's reputation transformed from eerie folklore into something far more chilling. An unsolved puzzle that seemed to grow more sinister with each passing year. 3 years passed after the disappearance, and the case had grown cold. Families still left flowers at the trailhead, and a memorial plaque was placed near the canyon, but official searches had ended long ago. By 2022, most people assumed the friend's story was just another tragic mystery swallowed by the wilderness. That was until a group of university scientists began an unrelated project in the same region studying the unique acoustic properties of Utah's slot canyons. They wanted to understand how sound traveled in such confined, twisting passages, believing it could provide insights for geology and even architectural design. What they discovered instead would reopen old wounds. The team set up specialized recording devices inside several canyons, including Whispering Slot. These devices were designed to capture faint echoes, sound waves, and vibrations that human ears couldn't detect. At first, the recordings were nothing unusual: wind currents, shifting stones, and the occasional bird or animal call. But when the equipment inside Whispering Slot was retrieved and analyzed, one of the audio engineers noticed something that froze him in place. Among the layers of natural noise was a pattern that didn't belong. It wasn't wind. It wasn't rockfall. It was structured, deliberate, almost like a human voice. The sound was faint, distorted by distance, but undeniably present. When enhanced, it seemed to repeat certain tones at irregular intervals, as though someone were trying to call out. Some parts were clearer than others, and on one recording, the word "help" could just barely be distinguished, stretched and warped as though carried from deep underground. The scientists were unsettled, but they weren't ready to announce it publicly. Instead, they ran multiple tests to rule out equipment malfunction, interference, or accidental contamination. Yet each time, the same result appeared. Whispering Slot Canyon carried a sound that defied explanation. Curiosity soon turned into obsession. The team left additional recorders overnight, hoping to catch more samples. What they found made the mystery darker. At odd hours of the night, the recorders picked up bursts of noise that resembled static, followed by faint overlapping voices. The voices were too garbled to understand fully, but at moments they seemed like police fragments of words cut off mid-sentence. Some scientists dismissed it as coincidence, but others privately admitted the voices sounded almost humanly distressed. The possibility was horrifying. Could the canyon be echoing the voices of those who had vanished? When the findings were quietly compared with past investigation files, something even more chilling surfaced. The pitch and tone of one captured voice bore an uncanny resemblance to Ethan's voice from a voicemail he had left his family before the trip. Another faint, muffled call resembled Mia's cadence when speaking, though no one could say it with certainty. The revelation sent shockwaves through the team, forcing them to ask the unthinkable. Were the missing friends somehow still calling out? Years after they had vanished, or had the canyon itself learned to mimic their voices, trapping their echoes within its stone walls? When the first audio clip was played back in the lab, silence filled the room. The scientists leaned in closer, straining to hear every detail. The faint, broken sound repeated itself, sometimes fading, sometimes growing sharper, like a weak signal fighting to break through. At first, it resembled nothing more than static noise, but as they enhanced the frequency range, the sound transformed into something chillingly human. It was a fragile, trembling voice, as if carried from an impossible distance. The most haunting part was that it seemed to form words, two syllables, drawn out, almost like a whisper. Help, please. The more the recordings were analyzed, the stranger they became. Patterns emerged, intervals of silence followed by sudden bursts of noise. The static wasn't random. It pulsed in a way that mirrored speech rhythm. Even more disturbing, some sections contained overlapping layers, as though more than one voice was calling at the same time. Scientists mapped the audio frequencies, trying to identify a source, but the results only deepened the mystery. The voices weren't consistent with echoes, nor could they be explained by wind or natural canyon acoustics. They behaved like something alive. One technician compared the voices against old case files provided by the families of the missing campers. Ethan's parents had shared a voicemail from him, recorded just a week before the trip. When analyzed side by side, the tonal patterns between the voicemail and the canyon recording matched with unnerving similarity. Another segment contained a higher-pitched voice, cracked by distortion, which bore striking resemblance to Mia's recorded speech from a school interview years earlier. Though the team could never prove it definitively, the similarities were undeniable. The canyon seemed to be replaying fragments of voices that should not exist anymore. The findings divided the scientific team. Some argued the sounds were nothing but coincidences or illusions caused by echo, distortion, and subconscious bias. But others admitted quietly, when away from the press and universities, that they had never encountered anything like it in their careers. One even confessed he couldn't sleep after listening to the recordings at night. He swore he heard his own name whispered back in the static, though no such sound existed on the actual files. The possibility that the canyon could mimic or even retain voices chilled them to their core. When the recordings were finally leaked to a small circle outside the research group, they spread quickly among investigators, journalists, and paranormal researchers. Many refused to believe them, calling them hoaxes, while others claimed the sounds were undeniable proof of something beyond science. Yet the most disturbing fact remained. The voices were real, they were recorded, and they were still emanating from Whispering Slot Canyon long after Ethan, Mia, and Jordan had disappeared. When whispers of the strange recordings reached beyond the university, a quiet decision was made. A small, specialized team of geologists, sound engineers, and professional cavers was assembled to investigate Whispering Slot Canyon in person. Officially, the project was listed as an extension of the acoustic research, but within the team, everyone knew this was more than science. They weren't just studying sound, they were searching for the missing. Equipped with advanced recording gear, thermal cameras, and climbing tools, they set out to enter the canyon where no official rescue teams had gone since 2019. From the very first steps inside, the team felt the weight of the canyon pressing down on them. The slot walls rose high above, so narrow at points that only one person could pass at a time. Even in daylight, shadows clung to the stone like a living thing. Radios crackled with interference, despite being tested in fully functional moments. Earlier, every movement echoed in strange, delayed patterns, as if the canyon itself was replaying their footsteps seconds after they had stopped walking. More unsettling still, some echoes didn't match their own steps at all. It sounded as though something unseen was following them, always a few paces behind. Deeper inside, the team began hearing what they couldn't explain. A faint murmur, softer than a whisper, drifted from somewhere ahead. At first they thought it was wind moving through the cracks, but the sound carried a cadence like syllables forming words. One of the engineers froze when he swore he heard Mia's voice calling his name. No one else heard it, but the terror in his eyes was enough to rattle the group. The atmosphere grew heavier, and some members admitted they felt as though they were being watched from the darkness above the canyon walls. Despite the unsettling sensations, the team pressed on, determined to reach the deepest chamber where the acoustic anomalies were strongest. But the deeper they went, the stranger the environment became. Temperatures dropped dramatically, the air turned unnaturally still, and their lights seemed weaker, swallowed by shadows that shouldn't have been there. Cameras malfunctioned, batteries drained faster than expected, and equipment designed to measure sound spiked wildly with unexplainable readings. It was as though the canyon resisted their presence, twisting both their tools and their senses. Tension grew with every step. One caver claimed he felt something brush against his shoulder in the narrowest passage, though nothing was there. Another nearly panicked when her headset filled with static, only to hear a faint, unmistakable word inside the noise: leave. Yet despite the fear, they continued forward, deeper into the labyrinth of stone, chasing the origin of the voices. What awaited them in the deepest part of Whispering Slot Canyon would prove far more disturbing than anything they had imagined. At the canyon's deepest chamber, the narrow passage widened into a vaulted hollow where light barely reached. The team switched on their strongest lamps, revealing smooth sandstone walls carved into impossible shapes by centuries of water and wind. But among the natural formations, something unnatural caught their attention. The walls bore deep scratch marks, long and jagged, etched into the rock at desperate angles. They weren't caused by tools or erosion, these were claw-like gouges, as though someone had dragged their fingernails across the stone until nothing remained. The discovery froze the group in silence. Near the base of the chamber, half buried, beneath sand and debris, one of the geologists unearthed an object. It was a camping lantern, weathered and rusted, but unmistakably modern. The team quickly cross-checked photographs from the original investigation. It was the same brand and model that Ethan, Mia, and Jordan had carried with them on their trip. The lantern still bore a faint scratch on its side identical to the mark Jordan's father remembered leaving years earlier when he helped his son pack. The confirmation sent a shiver through the group. The missing campers had been here as they documented the find. The air inside the chamber grew thick, almost suffocating. The acoustic equipment began spiking again, capturing bursts of sound far beyond normal frequency. Then, faintly at first, the canyon itself seemed to breathe. The walls reverberated with a low hum, and layered within it, the team heard voices, distorted, broken, but undeniably human. A chorus of whispers overlapped, pleading, crying, calling for help. Some sounded like the missing friends, others like voices unknown, voices that did not belong to any living soul. The chamber became a cage of echoes, and the sound came from every direction at once. Panic rippled through the group. They attempted to retreat, but the whispers grew louder, filling their ears like a storm. Some swore the walls moved closer, narrowing around them, while others felt vibrations beneath their feet, as though something massive stirred below. In the confusion, one of the team dropped a camera, and its lens cracked upon hitting the stone. The feed, however, flickered for a moment before showing something none of them could explain: a shadow human extending deeper in the chamber where no light reached. The figure vanished as quickly as it appeared, but the damage was done. Fear consumed the team, yet the recordings continued, capturing the most chilling evidence yet: a single, drawn-out voice, rising above the whispers, so clear that every person froze in terror. It was not distorted, not broken. It was sharp, desperate, and unmistakable. "Don't leave me here." The words echoed long after they stopped, reverberating through the canyon as if the stone itself was speaking. And still, no one could determine if it was a plea from the missing or something far older using their voices to call out. To this day, Whispering Slot Canyon remains an unsolved riddle. Scientists still detect the strange sounds, families still cling to the hope of answers, and those who dare to enter swear the place carries a presence that does not belong to this world. The lantern, the scratches, the voices, they are fragments of a truth too dark to fully grasp. Did Ethan, Mia, and Jordan leave behind echoes of their final moments, forever trapped in the stone? Or is the canyon itself alive, feeding on those who enter, twisting their voices into an eternal plea? No one knows. What is certain, however, is that Whispering Slot Canyon has claimed more than just 3 lives. It has claimed peace of mind, reason, and the very boundary between the living and the unknown. And when the desert winds die down, at night, and the canyon falls silent, some say you can still hear the faintest cry hidden in the shadows. A voice begging not to be forgotten. Hook for viewers. So, what do you believe? Are these voices the echoes of lost souls? Or is something deeper, older, and far more terrifying hiding within the canyon's walls?
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.